What brands really speak to you? What gives them the edge over their competitors? Kate Hamilton, co-founder of Sonder Tell, an exceptional communication agency, has a lot to say on this. The problem isn't that there are too many brands. The problem is that there are too many brands without a story that expresses who they really are. Sonder Tell, a name which alone provokes the imagination. Kate and her team work with brands from all sectors, but within the food and beverage space, their influence has meant that Mindful Chef and Rude Health have been able to convey their stories more effectively. Very impressive, since Sonder Tell only was created in 2018. So, I'm Joshua Patterson, and this is a Service Please episode, where we're going to talk about brand storytelling and who does it really well. So I think we're sort of on the idea of passion in life, and when you develop as a person, you sort of, I don't know really. For me, it was like within food, I always had this like affinity and a love for like watching Jamie Oliver on the TV, and I just absolutely used to love it and used to go home or being at home and like getting these things and practicing. And I can remember his restaurant opened in Oxford, and I was like studying at Portsmouth at the time, and I was like, I've got to get this job, I've got to get this job. I need to be learning and being involved and like in the mixer and just like developing myself more within that kind of space. And I just like found so many people that I loved and care about, and it was just fantastic. And for you, I'd just be really intrigued to know, like, was it a similar journey with like literature and writing and reading, that like from a particular point you were just like, I'm just in awe of this and I just need to like embrace it and just be within it?
I'm not sure that there was one moment. I kind of can't remember a time when I wasn't into that and wasn't sort of processing things through language and stories. And I just, growing up, I was maybe slightly like indoorsy child, like wasn't that into the kind of ball sports sort of world. I mean, even now someone throws me a ball, I'm like, panic goes through me. So it was much more, inside, reading after school, and it was just like always such a pleasure. And I think it was kind of the world building element of it and total escapism that I really enjoyed. And I think my parents really encouraged it as well. I was thinking about this the other day because I almost think it was a way for them to be like, oh, go and do this. But I remember one time, my dad's Irish and we were in Ireland on a family holiday, and for whatever reason the train broke down, and we'd been there for like an hour. Kids were getting really stressed, and my dad was like, okay, why don't you write a story about it? And it was actually such a good tactic from him, being like, here's a notebook and pen, why don't you write a story about the experience rather than annoy us? So I think I was always reading, kind of writing things in notebooks, recording things. I also had a radio show, which was just me kind of saying things into cassettes and interviewing like my Beanie Babies and things like that. So I think it was always that, enjoyed kind of reading, writing, recording, and having kind of imaginary conversations with people too.
Please tell me you put the cassettes like onto something and you have them somewhere, just like a monologue of you being like, so where are you going? Were you
like putting on all these different accents and things, yeah. I need to, with the kind of, I had this like Daisy cassette recorder, but yeah, it was fun.
I love that. So I guess really, there's so many bodies of work from like incredible people, and I'm sure there's lots of them that inspire you, and they have individual pieces that you just probably go back to time and time again. So is there anything in particular about any writer that really draws you in, that you can like reference or think of for you?
I think with any kind of story that I like, it's the kind of world building element, so that kind of painting a picture of a scene or a place where when you read it, you're just transported somewhere else. And it's not just literature either, you can get it from movies or a piece of music. I watched Dune the other day and I was like absolutely obsessed.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and as you know, and you're just like, I just want to be in it. So that kind of like real creation of magical worlds, I think, was what initially drew me to storytelling and still does today. And I mean, it's relevant in a brand context too, and we'll get onto that later. I think in terms of specific writers who do that well, I don't think that to create a world with language, you need to kind of be overly verbose or like wordy necessarily. I actually am more drawn to things, people who write in quite a kind of sparse, like pared back way. I guess someone like Sally Rooney, or I really like short stories for that, like really like Lydia Davis, another writer called Lucia Berlin, who have kind of quite short, punchy sentences, and it's almost like things happen between the lines, and it's not overly descriptive or flowery, and I think it kind of sets the scene in this way that then lets your imagination fill in the in-betweens. And again, I think that sort of relates to copywriting and what I do now, because in general the rules, like if you can say it or achieve what you want to achieve and build the emotion you want to build with fewer words, and that's probably the best way to do it. So things that aren't overdone but convey enough emotion for you to then take it, get a sense of the world, and then make it your own too.
Amazing. So 2 points. I was going to ask, do you ever read literature of people from a different language that's been translated into English? And if there ever is, like, if that brings out a different kind of energy for you when you're in that kind of space? Because it's something I've never done, if I'm being completely honest. But I wondered if you see cultural changes within language and stuff like that in written word.
Oh, that's a good question. I studied Spanish at university, so I would have to read text in Spanish, but the reality was that was quite heavy going, so sometimes you'd had the English translation as well to kind of compare it. And yeah, I guess you do lose. And what actually is really interesting in that is that, you know, you can see different translations of a same text, and they've been done very differently. So part of it is quite a practical act of what's the form of the verb and what's the right structure of the sentence, but then it's also a kind of creative act, and like, how would I take that emotion from Spanish and convey it in English? So yeah, I think there are all those questions when things get translated that it's like one part science, practicality, and then one part emotion, and left up to kind of interpretation of the translator.
Yeah. And then on June, I literally sat in the cinema, and it finished, and I was like, I could sit here just until the next one comes. I was like, I could literally just sit here and wait.
I was like so sad.
I was like, what is it, 9 months? Like, I'm like, I got this.
And it was a long story as well. I also feel like it's because the trailer really trolled us, because like Zendaya was not really in it, or she's in it for like the last 10 minutes or whatever, and then she comes on and you're like, is that it? Is that all we get of you? So, yeah.
Honestly, I just was like, wow.
Hurry up, June.
Yeah. So, also for me, I can remember the first time I met you, and you told me about what you were doing and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, this is interesting, that's really cool. And then I Googled you, and then I Googled basically what Sonder meant, and it just like blew my mind and transported me. So I'd really, really love to know like how you came across it and how you decided that name, really.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a journey. So Sonder Tell is the agency I run, which helps brands tell their stories better, and there's a big emphasis on kind of verbal identity and making sure you get your words and your story straight before you start talking. So naturally, if you're placing a lot of emphasis on words, then naming your own business is quite a stressful act, because you're like, okay, we've got to really get this name. It's
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time back and forth. I posted a WhatsApp between my business partner Emily and myself the other day, and some of the things we threw out were terrible. One was like sermon, one was like sonversation. It was all very confusing. Anyway, so then I think my friends in our circle sort of knew that we were stressing out about it, and my friend sent me this word, Sonder, and there was this American linguist called John Koenig who'd spent a lot of time making up words for obscure human emotions that didn't have language to them yet. And one of those words was Sonder, and he defined it as the moment of realization that everyone around you has their own story. So it's something I experience quite a lot on if you take the bus and you're sitting there and it's a full bus, and you're like, oh, that person gets sad, or I wonder what they're thinking about, and that kind of realization that everyone around you is living out their own world, their own story, their own life in their own way. So we really like the word, and then I guess the idea is that everyone's got their own story and we help them tell it. someone the other day, we're working with a Swedish graphic designer at the moment, and he also told me that Sonder means broken in Swedish, which was, I didn't know that. And I was like, okay, well, we'll help you fix everything. But yeah, that was the story of Sonder Tell.
I love it. Yeah, no, so the story is, I can remember doing it and Googling it and be like, oh my God, that's what it means. And it transported me. I remember like sitting in the car as a child and like the radio going on and being at the traffic lights and looking at someone in the car next to me, and then they would drive off in a different direction. Like, honestly, like bamboozled my mind that their life was as intricate as and exciting or like dynamic as mine, but I would never know them or be part of them. And I was just like, that was just wild. So like when you said, I was like, that's a very good name.
Yeah, so they're turning right and you're turning left, and you're like, have a nice life, yeah.
Peace. For you, do you have to, like, do you go back to all of the things in which you love when it comes to like reading, storytelling, writing, to be able to actually express yourself, to be able to keep that momentum to take into like your work and things like that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you start off doing something because you love it and you find it exciting, and then as something grows, which is what you set out to achieve, then you do start having to, I don't know, well now my job is more kind of delegating and making sure my team are happy and making sure my team can carry out the work in the right way, and it's much more of a kind of management, strategic, creative problem solving piece, and I do sometimes miss just the creativity of not having that pressure. But I think it's, giving yourself time, like making those moments for yourself. And I still, if there's quite a big pitch, I like getting involved in the kind of storytelling of that part and the creativity of that. And also it's really nice to see, you facilitating other people to be creative in that way. And not getting too bogged down in the admin side because there's a lot of it. So I guess I'll try and get through that in a morning and then have more of a kind of thinking afternoon where I can kind of let ideas percolate and then bring them back to the team and find a way of making them happen.
And do you ever like sit on a train and hope for a delay so that you can write some stories about people on the train? Like
Yeah, I'm not writing that much at the moment, which does make me sad, but I feel like it's just like I'm taking a break. There'll be a time when there's more space for it. I did do writing like a short story course a couple of years ago at Goldsmiths in the evening, which was so nice because it kind of makes you, I guess it gives you the structure for actually being creative, whereas you've just left to your own devices, then, go and watch June or something.
No, I think, that's a really, really valid point. That is a really valid point. I think structure is so important within a creative framework, and I think, you can just go on tangents, and that's actually like compounding it and like seeing it through and understanding how to get to that end point of it and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I don't think, there's not, the best stories are strategic as well, and that's kind of where we've grown into at Sonder Tell, because we started off being much more about kind of applicational copy and helping people write good websites or products or blogs or editorial content, and we've ended up getting much more involved in earlier stage brand strategy and helping them shaping what they want to be, the role they want to play for customers and the position they're going to take in the market. And traditionally that's done in quite sort of like a formulaic way of like brand matrices and diagrams. And actually we were like, if you take a strategy or take a market position and tell a story with it, then there's real power in that, and you can get your whole team excited about it. You can use it to filter down not just how you're talking to your customers, but how you're talking to potential talent, people you're hiring. If you're early stage business, it can shape like the investor deck that you're putting in front of investors. So yeah, I don't think, it's not as black and white as strategies here and stories here. Actually, in reality, you want them to be working together and achieving business objectives and creative brand objectives at the same time.
Yeah, and I think just making everything really cohesive. I think I can really relate to the idea of having people on board the team and actually then believing and understanding what it is that you are trying to convey and communicate. I think sometimes when you are a little bit, I don't know, like that creative mind, or you're like, this is what I want to do. In your head, you're like, I know exactly where it's going and what's happening. But actually, how often are you communicating it in a really concise way to other people? So having someone or a strategist or a team like yourselves come in and be like, all of that like stuff going on there, if we can put it into a way that can just be a formula for everyone to then understand, I think that makes a lot of sense, really. one of the things that I wanted to have a conversation is like, I've been quite lucky to like travel the world and everything. And when you do so, and language, one of the first things in which I realised when I travel the world is everyone in the world doesn't speak English, which is quite an eye opener for me, if I was being honest. I was like, I need water, man. Like, what's going on here? Like, I've come a long way. But
Google Translate.
well, no, it was before. Like, I can remember I had a BlackBerry when I was this is the craziest thing. I can remember I went traveling for a year solo, and it was like absolutely fascinating. And like, it was a different life. I did biomedical science, and I was like, maybe I want to be a doctor, but my grades weren't good enough, so I was like, I needed to go and volunteer. So I volunteered in hospitals in South America for 6 months, and it was pretty wild. But I can remember, like, I was in Quito and I went up to this convenience store and I was like, can I have some water? And they were like, I don't know what you mean. And it had bollards, so you couldn't get into the shop to be able to, like, get it, because obviously it's quite a violent place. So I just had to, like, walk in 30-degree heat without any water, and I was just like...
Sounds sweaty.
It was very sweaty. I was like, we've just got to learn another language. I now know it's agua, by the way.
Por favor.
Exactly. But... one of the ways in which I was able to communicate with people was through eating, and like people sharing food. I'd be at a house and like house sharing, or I can actually even remember there was a group of like junior doctors where I would be working in the A&E, and then they would take me to parties and we'd do stuff, and it was always around food, in which I'd gather around a table, and that would be their way of expressing. And I was wondering, for you, can you see any rhymes within storytelling, within food, and the way in which you do stuff?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think food, yeah, like as to your point, is a form of kind of self-expression and communication, and the kind of, I guess, when you're planning a meal or a dinner or something for people you care about, you're going through like a kind of strategy phase. So you're like, oh, what's the mood? What do I want to put on the table? And then there's like a kind of creative phase where you're like, oh, do I fancy this or that? Or like, what's the emotion? I think when I'm planning food, it's more like, what's the feeling or like the mood that you want to create, and then working backwards from that. So is it then like going into a certain type of cuisine or a certain style of like, is it sharing plates or like little dishes that you're all picking from?
Yeah.
So I guess it is all like how you want to make people around you feel, which is also what stories are doing, like creating emotion for people and kind of shared experience.
Completely, and I think like even setting the scene, so whether it would be like music or like the lighting and like how all of that, like would you have a tablecloth to be able to display a different kind of sophistication, or actually something a little bit more rustic, depending on, I don't know, there's like loads of ways of like conveying that kind of thing to be able to have it. But yeah, no, definitely.
That's so true actually, yeah. The way you lay the table and what music you're putting on kind of, sets the scene for all the story you're about to create.
Potentially, yeah. I think always, whenever I speak to you, you're just extremely humble with, I think, what you've achieved in the space of time which Sonder Tell has been around. And you like look at some of the work in which you've done, and Rude Health has been one of your clients. Mindful Chef before didn't really have a form of positioning, story, or even a tone of voice, and you have made that happen. And now, for me, I look at it like, you know, On the Table was it still is an incredible project in which I'm really looking forward to take forward. So I would look at something like Mindful Chef, and it's like, that's an incredibly successful brand that's getting into a lot of people's homes and doing great things. So I'd just be intrigued, obviously that's big brands, but if I was like someone that's started a passion and a love, and I'm like, oh my God, I've like formulating a business here, and I'm understanding it, and I need to be able to communicate more effectively to the people that I don't know, that are my community, really. Like, when should people really start be thinking about their positioning in that sense? When should they like be creating a tone of voice, or how do they even find what their tone is? And also, being able to display those stories, does it have to always be with written word? Can it be via, you know, social media and those kind of things, really?
Yeah, one of the things we say at Sonder Tell when people are starting to think about brands, it's a question we get asked a lot, is when should we do this? And we would say brand early rather than often. So as soon as you have the resource to start brand building, do it. And the reason is that it's so competitive at the moment, especially in the food space. The barriers to entry are lower than ever. You can get capital to start something relatively easy, which is positive thing, but it's also made it a lot harder to get cut through and to win in a category or a space, essentially. And actually the ones that go the distance are the ones that have the best brand and are selling something beyond just a product, and actually have, you know, managed to connect with customers through a sense of shared identity and values as well. And when you're starting to think about brand, you've got to really start with the customer and the problem that you're solving for them. So, and it's never just like, oh, I wanted water to be fizzier, so we made fizzier water. It's more like what is the mindset that they're struggling with, and how can we kind of tap into that, and then building a brand and an identity that speaks to that. So with On the Table at the time, it was very much about this person who really wants a way to support independence and wants to feel like they're kind of championing proper produce, but doesn't necessarily have the time or the know-how to source that for themselves. And so then that became this whole brand belief in kind of doing things for independence, and this tone of voice that kind of mirrored the you know, the local butcher or the baker, and creating that kind of sense of real connection with people. So it wasn't just these meal kits and experiences, which are amazing, but the sense of like real people behind it. Yeah, and I guess, again, we did rude health positioning, and that was more about defining their real difference in a category that's quite crowded. Obviously, they had Oatly taking up quite a lot of space, and their ownable difference was like their product and the depth of flavour of that. So built out this kind of brand world about the bright way to be healthy rather than the right or wrong way. And again, your positioning can shift a little bit depending on new business objectives. Mindful Chef was going into retail, so they had slightly different objectives that they wanted to then hit with their tone of voice. But you're kind of, what you're about and the values in the world you're trying to build, you want to define that as early as possible and then build out from there. And, you know, we start with words at Sonder Tell, but not at all saying that's the end point of your brand comms. Like, they should be the kind of blueprint, I guess, for other activations, whether it's video or, you know, campaigns and advertising.
Yeah, you've hit a really interesting point, I think, starting early, but within the food world, I've seen such a change where there used to only be, you know, a few people, and now you said it is saturated, and it is that point of difference and bringing a true experience, I think, to the culinary thing. And, you know, there's burgers everywhere, and I know for a fact that people are getting the meat from the same person, they're getting the cheese from the same person, the bread from the same person. So what actually is it that one is delivering that's different from others? And I think within the food space, that's actually where there's going to be a lot of drop-off in the next few years. And I think there actually will be a few big contenders that are able, and it probably will be the people that get some capital and investment, are able to actually amplify their voice a little bit more and be able to reach more people and stuff like that.
Yeah, but not just the investment, because you have to then have the brand to be able to leverage that investment. Otherwise, you're just getting money and like probably pumping it into improving the product, but without, you know, and investors more and more want to see evidence of brand early as well before investing. Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting for restaurants too. I was thinking about this the other day, like who I actually kind of follow and like engage with as a brand beyond just enjoying eating there. So I really like Quo Vadis and St. John's newsletter, and both of them, they almost have this kind of like the aspirational target customer is something we talk about at Sonder Tell quite a lot, and aspiration can be quite a loaded word because it has kind of connotations of wealth and things that are exclusive. And I don't know if you've watched the Abercrombie and Fitch documentary. Have you watched that recently?
No.
But it kind of it got used very negatively there because they were essentially building this very exclusive brand that only really resonated with a very select group of people. And build, like, you don't, so if you think of your customer not in terms of demographics, like, oh, they're 28 and they live here, but more in terms of the mindset that you want to create for them. And I think Quo Vadis and St. John do that really well. Quo Vadis especially, like, I feel when I go in there like I'm this like eccentric foodie in like this part of like old world Soho, and I'm not at all. And then when I read these newsletters, I'm like, ooh, like it's all a bit dandy and fabulous, you know what I mean? And they're like marketing to that. And we were talking about it on our team the other day, like Harley Davidson's aspirational customer is the last American cowboy. In reality, 90% of their audience are middle-aged dentists who live in Florida. But for the 5 minutes that they ride their motorbike, they are the last American cowboy. And that's kind of what I feel like with someone like Quo Vadis. I'm like, oh, I'm so unusual and eccentric and foodie. And anyway, they do a really good job of kind of catering to this mindset and building a world out through that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think those are two really good references. I was just been in St John's this week again. It was just like, it's quite funny. Rory, who I interviewed at the beginning of this whole series, he had a book published, and one of the things that was catalysed while he was having dinner at St John's. So I basically did a bit of a book in situ kind of thing, and like had a meal to myself, and it was like really amazing. And it was just like, I was just been reading up even more on St John's, and it's just like the story behind it was just phenomenal, and even the way in which it continues to be displayed is just fantastic. And I think, yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's like really just enriching what it is beyond. And I think, yeah, two great references there. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm not and haven't always been like the most advocate reader in my life, like when it comes to books and stories. And I think I've been absorbed information particularly like a different way. And it's something which I am trying to get to, and like being able to bring it into my life. But I also am very aware that I think potentially the younger generation are being deterred even more away from like reading stories, short form, all of these kind of things, and they're actually going into a more social media kind of basis. So for you, when you're thinking about Sonder Tell moving forward, is that something in which social media can be like an integral part of the conversation and the journey when you're speaking with new clients and things like that, or is it something in which you try to lean a little bit more away from, or how do you approach it?
No, we definitely don't lean away from it. It's like a seriously important channel for the brands that we work with. We're not content strategy specialists, so we're much more the upfront, obsess over the upfront brand strategy and what you want to stand for. But that's something we're going to look at doing more of, is then how that filters down into content strategy and the specific channels that you need to be engaging with. Yeah, and I mean, you and I were at an event the other day, and a lot of the conversation was on TikTok, and I was like, yeah, I mean, you can't not think about that now, even starting as a brand, especially if you're trying to appeal to a younger demographic, which brands will be increasingly. So, yeah, all up for storytelling on social media. And I guess that's one of the things we do think about is like, this is sometimes brand strategy gets very deep and lofty, and let's say it's about a feeling of belonging, and it's like, okay, so let's test that against certain channels and make sure that it can be then brought down into something that's relatable on an everyday basis. So Airbnb's brand strategy is, well, their tag is belong anywhere. Like, that is fundamentally, it's about humans want to belong, and when they travel they want to belong to the places they're visiting, but then they bring it kind of down to earth in these very friendly and relatable ad campaigns which go out across social. So yeah, we do keep that in mind, and we'll do more and more moving forward.
Yeah. No, I think that, yeah, the conversation the other day when we were at the Courier event, it was wild. Everyone, like, even the panel host was, referring to amount of views that they'd had on something, and like that was their form of, medium and stuff like that. And it was really fascinating as well. I think, there was a conversation about the idea of celebrity chefs, and even I referred at the beginning to this, like Jamie Oliver, and how I found that so appealing. And now you have people that are able, or were able, to just cook at home through the pandemic, and they've gone from 0 followers up into now a brand of themselves, basically doing recipes. And it's like, how do now they communicate in a more, I don't know, potentially a more effective way? Maybe it's actually like reverse doing the situation, so actually it's like the social media and then going to more the more maybe traditional forms of communication within strategy and things like that.
But I think the social media strategy has to be guided by something that's a little bit more permanent. So I think it has to be coming from this like quite rooted brand place, and then seeing social media as a channel rather than. But it doesn't always happen like that, I guess, because some brands do start on social media, but at some point I think it needs to be like... Yeah.
But I mean, like, reverse engineering it. So almost like, working from this like quite naive native state, and then being like, right, how can I now formulate and create something which is going to just resonate with even more people outside? Because social media, it's fine, but it is a generational thing, and it's obviously going to grow. But there's this whole swathe of people. Like, I've got friends in, I'm 33 now, I've got friends that are basically leaving social media. And it's like, there are so many brands that are still going to have a communication with them. And obviously that falls outside of that realm, like you're saying, like instead of content. So for those people that maybe have grown in social media, it's like they have to now access a new market and a new, you know what I mean? And it'll be quite interesting
totally.
for that.
I think it just comes down to understanding who your customer is and where they're showing up. Like, are they going to interact? Is a newsletter the best way to target them? If you're a D2C brand, then maybe. So yeah, it's understanding who exactly it is you're going after and where best to reach them, and then speaking to them on those channels.
And I'd be intrigued, just like, how does the language change when it goes like, not to get like hyper granular with different sections of the population, but like, have you got any like really good examples where you just think, yeah, that word is for that type of person or things like that? You know what I mean? That you go to and it's like, yeah, that's the right one.
So I guess we're always trying to get brands out of thinking about kind of demographics. So, 28 to 40 here and 40 upwards here. We're trying to unite those customer bases in that kind of aspirational mindset. So what's the label or what's the category you can give people beyond just their age, income, location? What do they care about? What do they fear? What do they go to bed about? Like bed worrying about and that sort of thing. So and building out a label and then talking to that rather than just an age group. But yeah, there's not any specific words or things like that we throw around. It's more like getting a label for that group and then figuring out a brand platform that will speak to them. And then we kind of look at the voice afterwards. Once you've got the positioning in place, then the voice is almost like comes quite naturally. And I think sometimes brands do get it a bit wrong. They think tone of voice can solve sort of all problems. We get quite a lot of briefs that are like, we have a X problem, or we need to sound more, we need to be more challenging. Can you build us a tone of voice? And it's like, we can do that, but you have to be challenging something in order to actually sound challenging. Otherwise, it's just, like throwing a bit of paint on something. So yeah, it's got to come from positioning first, and then the voice comes after.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And is there a new train of thought actually not putting people into demographics and things like that in your field kind of thing, or do you think that's actually?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that actually. Okay.
Or it's your train of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. But I like that.
No, I think it is probably, it does exist, but I don't know what the kind of, the trends have been before.
No, I like that though. Because in my mind, it is like, unfortunately you do just put brackets. I think it's probably because when you go onto a computer, you're just like 35 to 45 and things like that. So it's just it's almost ingrained within your mind to label people and that kind of thing.
Labels, but ultimately you want to be uniting people
100%.
beyond those labels and drawing them into this kind of mindset.
Yeah, that's why I really liked it. Yeah, we do have to be more unified. I think there's too much divisive things in this world nowadays. I've found all of this conversation super fascinating and just so enjoyable. No, it's been amazing. And I think as well, for me, it would just be I'd love to open it up for you and just be I don't know, sometimes you hear podcasts and stuff like that and it seems quite question-based and maybe the person's oh my God, there are so many things in which I would have liked to explore. So I was wondering, is there anything in which for you that's not been discussed that you're just I never get to talk about this and you know what I mean in these kind of situations? Could be completely unrelated to Sonder Tell. It could be personal, I don't know.
Should we talk about swimming for a minute?
Yeah, we could talk about swimming for a minute. That's really nice.
I actually feel like a fake swimmer at the moment though. Because I don't think I've swum all this year. I think I talk about how much I like swimming more than I actually go swimming. Which I'm upset about.
People come up to me and they're like, oh my God, how's the swimming going? And in my head I'm like, I haven't been in a pool for 8 months. And I'm like,
I know, me too. It's so good. It's such a good form of exercise. I feel like a fraud.
Reel off all the memories and stuff like that, and obviously then talk about the 10K swim that we did and just still live through that.
Exactly, but it's quite a big swim, so it still stumps people. They're like, whoa, 10K, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty But I do want to go swimming more, and now the sun's out, we should do that.
Yeah, 100%. Well, hopefully you're going to come along for the 6K swim, so we just need to get training for that.
Oh, is it 6?
Yeah.
Oh, we can do that.
Yeah, and also it's the estuary towards the ocean, so it will be downstream as well, so it'll feel like 4. So basically it's just chill.
Yeah. I've also noticed lots of writers are swimmers and swimmers are writers. Random thought. I don't know why that is. Maybe because it's quite meditative and quite a good way of clearing your head.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I think that it's the conversation which I go to about swimming all the time, that basically, you get into that rhythm and that stride. And basically, normally there's like, my head's like quite shouty sometimes. I've even said to myself today in the kitchen, I'm like, why am I shouting in my head? And it's like, yeah. And it's like, I feel like swimming enables the shouting to just finish, and then it's just like you get into that like meditative state, and it's just like all very calm, and like then actually I find some of the best ideas I've ever had have been like just in those moments of serenity and stuff like that.
I actually find that I don't think at all when I'm swimming, but that's quite nice in itself. Because I always go and I'm like, oh, I'll sort out this problem, and then I can't really, because all I can think about is like counting lengths or like remembering to breathe. But actually that's almost meditation, because your mind goes pretty blank.
Yeah. You just focus on that single individual thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Get back in that pool.
Yeah, especially when when the light is just like twinkling on it on the bottom of and you're just like, that's quite nice.
Poetry.
It is. So I'm having a bit of a common theme through all of these, and it's about a little bit of exploration for me about people's restaurants in which they absolutely love, and like if there's any hidden gems in which you're just like, oh, I just absolutely love this place, it's where I go to, and like I always love to share this experience with people. And also I guess like for you, if there is anyone that like truly inspires you in like work life or like personal life that you'd love to take there, if anything comes to mind.
I love so many restaurants.
That's a good answer.
That's hard. I'm going to say Campagna & Jones on Columbia Road, which isn't like particularly a hidden gem or anything, but it is amazing. And so it used to be a old bakery, I think. And the owner, Emma, is from Campania in Italy, and her chefs are as well from Naples and around Naples. And I did a event there a few years ago with Mina Holland, who's editor of Guardian Cook, to raise money for this charity called World Reader, and we based it on the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante, that's all based in Naples. So it's kind of based around those books, and then we did this whole feasting menu of like amazing deep fried mozzarella and pasta and delicious things.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, so good. So I would like to take Elena Ferrante, who's the author of those books, but she's also anonymous, so no one knows exactly who she is.
Okay.
They think actually she might be a German author, back to your point on kind of translation. But I would love to know who she is and then take her for dinner at Campania and eat deep fried mozzarella and ask her about her books.
I think that's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. Like, that was great. Yeah, I've never been there. I love Columbia Road. It's just actually like a fascinating spot. I always, for some reason, used to love the market. And then there's the pub. I can't even remember the name of it at this moment in time. But they always have little stalls, and I just used to like sit there with a pint of Guinness. And there was this old guy, and he always used to finish. He had like Hawaiian shirts on and like all of these like gems and stuff like that. And he would pack down outside. And I'd always have not the same conversation with him, but basically just be like, oh, what's going on? And he's like, I'm off to Barbados soon. Oh. And he's like, he took like a month to Barbados, and I always just imagine like, yeah, I'm like selling a lot of flowers, mate. And I always just imagine him with all of his like gems and like everything like that, with the shirt, and then just a pina colada, and just being like, life is good. Oh, but yeah, no, it's a great area of London. It's a great thing, and I have to go and check it out. That's what we want to.
It's quite otherworldly, Campania, as well. It does feel like you're in Italy almost. It's and also just nice relaxed vibe.
I think that's also relating back to what I was saying about the experiences within food. That actually is a selling point now. Like a lot of restaurants, it feels like you walk through the door and you are completely and utterly transported. Like I was saying about Bruto the other day, you were like, oh, let's go to Bruto. Yeah. Anyway, honestly, it's been an absolute joy to be speaking with you today, and it's been amazing. And thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem at all. If you could tell one other person about this podcast, or even use their phone to like, follow, and share, it will be much appreciated. You can also go one step further and become a patron of the podcast via our website at www.serviceplease.io. Any monthly contributions will help amplify the voices of the hospitality and wider food industry, and enabling more people to understand the innovations and daily struggles of one of the most dynamic sectors, and of course, the tastiest.